What's up, guys? Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of our Meet Recap Part 2 with Halloween Havoc 3. And today I want to talk about equipped benching with a crew, and all those sorts of things. So outside of squatting, when it comes to the bench press, I believe that the bench press is going to be probably the lift. You could kind of argue, depending on how strong you are, where training with a crew can be extremely effective, especially if you're someone like myself, who really has a hard time taking the weight out themselves when they're fully set up. So like for me, I would even put potentially the bench press maybe even slightly above the squat in terms of like the ability to get help and the ability to impact my performance. But depending on if you are able to kind of take the weight out yourself, without too much problem, and especially if you're a raw lifter, then I would say that the bench press is going to be the lift that you can benefit the second most outside of squatting. I do think from like the psychological effects, the psychological boost of having a back spotter behind you, having a crew behind you. And I think that, just for most people, the absolute weight of a squat is going to be heavier than a bench press, even in, equipment in most cases. Again, with some of these new bench shirts that may be not accurate for 100% of people. And, in terms of most people will have the ability to kind of grind out a squat, more so than a bench press. The bench press is going to have a smaller margin of error. And especially when you get into a bench shirt, that groove gets smaller and smaller. The margin for error gets smaller and smaller and more razor thin. The more kind of plies you have, the tighter the bench shirt is, and all of those sorts of things. And things can go wrong very quickly in a shirted bench situation. So when it comes to like a raw lifter and, the longevity of the athlete, the shoulder health, things like that. So one thing to consider, the shoulder is going to be a much smaller joint than your hip. So the propensity for wear and tear is going to be much higher. Again, if taking myself as an example, I had a lot of shoulder issues even early on, just wrestling, playing football, taking hits, getting my arm wrenched back in wrestling. So I kind of came into powerlifting with a lot of wear and tear in my shoulders. And even though I probably have a relatively kind of good build for benching, just having that wear and tear in my shoulders, and also just psychologically just not placing as much importance on the bench press. As an athlete, it was always drilled in, you need strong legs, you need a strong squat. And I think part of that, and I would say I have a pretty like average build. I'd say, in terms outside of the deadlift where I've, smaller hands, those sorts of things, but I would say a pretty, average arm length for my size, average kind of, torso to leg ratio. So nothing too kind of crazy. I would say pretty average proportions, but if I had to say, if I had more of a propensity towards having a squattier build, a squat and kind of bench build, if you will, but my bench press never really was world class. I never really hit stellar numbers. Like I said, even at my heaviest, even at my peak raw strength, I was just like shy of like a 400-pound raw, which, is certainly good, but, a 400-pound raw bench for like a super heavyweight lifter, not really super impressive by, strength standards. Still very elite in terms of general population, but not something that is going to be, turning heads, if you're kind of close to like a bodyweight bench. I'd say even when I was at my leanest, maybe I could, sniff out a 1.5 times bodyweight bench press, which for me is like kind of like the minimum standard for athletics and just, a strength standard in general. So that's something I've kind of struggled with, and mostly because due to shoulder health. So, and when we're kind of talking about a bench press, we're talking about a competition style. So slight pause, controlling the bar, stopping the bar in your chest, keeping your glutes in contact with the bench. Obviously kind of more of a gym bro bench. It may be a little bit easier to kind of achieve those standards, but that's not what we're talking about in the context of powerlifting. So when it comes to, what you'll kind of see in masters powerlifting, you'll kind of see usually kind of the squat is the first lift to go because of your ability to kind of hold on to the bar in a competitive setting. So having enough external rotation and retraction and extension of the shoulder is going to kind of typically you're going to lose that ability over time. So if you actually have bad shoulders, usually actually your ability to squat is going to be maybe the first to go, even before benching. And I also just want to highlight here, you're going to see Chrissy of Bergen County Barbell. She's one of the best training partners I've ever had and seen. I did a lot of my work for my, showdown with Travis Rogers back in 2023. I did a lot of my training at Bergen County Barbell, and Chrissy was by far the most helpful training partner, attention to detail, really anything you need. She's just really solid with that. And again, in addition to Rob and Johnny and everyone else, but I just want to give a hat tip to her. She's always kind of looking out, kind of like the gym mom, if you will. And people like that are invaluable to a crew. So I just want to just give her a quick shout out. And, I can't say enough good things about Chris's team. So you'll kind of see when Dave is kind of on the bar. And that's like one thing which I think is great when you have friends and that are truly part of this community. Even though, myself and Chris, we have our own gyms. We have our own meets. We're part of different federations. We're still kind of supporting each other and helping each other out. And I think that's really what it's all about. And even, with David Washington, used to come to our gym in New York a lot since I've moved. Basically, a lot of David's training is done at Bergen County Barbell. He follows our program. I'm his coach. But the Bergen County crew always helps him out. And I think that's really amazing. And that's kind of sometimes rare to see. You have, higher level coaches and athletes. And certainly Chris is a much higher level athlete than I am or will ever be or ever was. But it's just kind of cool because that's really what it's all about is we're just helping each other get stronger. We're helping each other get to the platform in one piece. And we're all just trying to make the world a better place to lift. So you'll kind of see with a lot of the shirted lifters, the handoff is going to be more and more important. The takeout is going to be important, making sure that we get the bar out right over the shoulders. Anyways, what I was kind of saying before, and I'm going to get into the performance of the bench press. Sometimes your shoulders are going to be the first to go, or maybe you have a hip or knee problem, and just like the ability to, especially nowadays, the squat standard has gotten more and more stringent, and to be honest, I think we kind of took it a little bit too far. So generally what you'll see in equipped lifting, sometimes the standard is a little bit more relaxed. In raw lifting, I think it's a little bit too egregious at this point. And this can become an issue when you have equipped lifters and raw lifters at the same meet. What I was kind of getting at before with the RPS was known. It's gotten better for having maybe looser standards with the squat for raw lifters, but for equipped lifters, they almost feel like it's sometimes too it's too stringent. So it's kind of like, which I think is actually good to be kind of more in the middle of the road. So anyways, I did think it's kind of funny where sometimes like some people view the RPS as too strict for equipped lifters and some people view it as too loose. So I do think it's kind of good that we're kind of generally in that middle ground, but I think generally equipped lifters can do a better job of upholding a higher standard when it comes to squat depth, when it comes to like downward movement in the bench press. You see this a lot especially with the band shirts. So I see like a lot of benches that probably should not get passed because of that downward motion. Part of the lift is establishing control. Now that being said, should downward motion be even a rule? I kind of maybe think that it shouldn't be, because I think that if you're able to kind of save the lift, that's kind of making it more challenging. It's not to your benefit to have downward motion, is what I'm saying. So, and then even things like ramping the deadlift and stuff, I think that there's varying degrees of deadlift lockout. We'll kind of get into that in a second in the next video. But anyways, so what I was getting at, sometimes you'll see a lot more old timers that either maybe do a push pull or they might do bench only, depending on what their strengths and weaknesses are. But usually either the bench or the deadlift or some combination of those lifts. And again, if you're like someone like myself, I think the strict curl is a great option, even if Chris always busts my chops that it's one of the most lame competitions you could do. My point is being open to single lift competition is a great way to stay involved in the sport. It's a great way to stay competitive, keep your mind fresh, keep your mind right, get you going back to the gym. So, and when you kind of add a second layer to that, whether it's multiply, single ply, unlimited, the band shirts in particular, I'm not sure if I would recommend jumping into a band shirt right away. I think it's good to learn poly. I think it's good to learn a single ply or multiply shirt, and just kind of get used to dealing with the pressure, getting that, but you will get the benefit of adding the extra compression on the shoulder. And you'll kind of see Christy here is helping set up on the bench, and it's going to be really important for, again, success on the platform. So making sure the shirt doesn't ride into your neck, things like that. So it takes a team effort. So if you're a shirted lifter, the bench press may even be more important in terms of having a crew, making sure the shirt is set correctly, making sure it's not riding up on your neck, making sure the takeout is correct, again, because that bar is off a half inch in terms of your groove. It can either dump on your stomach or dump towards your face. Also having the face savers is going to be really critical. So safety is a must. If you've ever seen my accident with Larry Wheels, I was like inches away from going to the hospital or, potentially, even worse. So the bench shirt is going to allow for compression of the shoulder. And I kind of mentioned it's going to be the smaller of your kind of, ball and socket joints, if you will. Hip joint can take a lot more of a beating. So if you're someone that has hip problems, knee problems, back problems, even shoulder problems, an equipped bench can be a way that you can kind of stay competitive, even if it's a loose bench shirt. And this is kind of where I think it's important to kind of more strive for your personal record. I've never done a 3-ply bench. I've never done a 3-ply bench in competition. I've only kind of gone to 2-ply successfully. And part of that is I wanted to just have a bench that was a little bit more repeatable, especially when I was, dropping weight classes and cutting a lot of weight. If you've ever used a bench shirt before, if you lose too much weight or you gain too much weight, it's just not going to work the same. So the band shirts are a little bit more forgiving in terms of having a larger window of a body weight that it will work for. But the tighter the shirt and like the less amount of plies, I would say the less forgiving it is, and the tighter the window in terms of what weights will touch, the tighter the window in terms of what body weight is going to be effective, with that shirt. So those are things to consider. But in terms of, again, extending your life, having a fun competition, being competitive, doing a fun activity with your friends, I think that, equipped benching can be something that you could do for a relatively long period of time and allow you to stay kind of in the sport. And you kind of see, like with raw lifters especially, you're seeing more pec injuries, you're seeing, more pec ruptures. Sometimes you even see things like triceps detaching or kind of elbows dislocating. So really, really important to kind of understand that there's going to be more risk for like joint wear and tear, and also even soft tissue injuries if you're not kind of careful. And especially nowadays when people are kind of benching with very high frequency. I've seen some females and, these tested lifters doing anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week of benching. It's a lot of wear and tear in the shoulders. And I think that's something that you have to understand. There are going to be some downstream effects that you want to be careful and considerate of. So, and outside of that, I also think that people should spend a little bit more time doing hypertrophy work in the off season, just isolation work in general to kind of build up the muscles around the joint. That was something that really helped reinvigorate. So in 2020, I did my bodybuilding show. I did a lot more general training, gave my shoulders a break, put on some more mass on my upper body. And then from there, I was able to kind of, take my bench, actually hit some all-time bench PRs. Again, it wasn't quite an apples-to-apples comparison using a banded shirt versus a poly shirt, but I was able to take my all-time PR from 575 all the way last year. I was able to hit, a 635-pound bench press in competition, actually at the Halloween Havoc 2, which I had a great time competing at. So it's going to allow you to potentially, again, extend that career, have more consistency in your training, and avoid some wear and tear, especially of like the shoulder joint. So, and another thing that you want to consider when it comes to like getting a handoff and stuff like that is that a lot of times that kind of shoulder extension component is going to be the most stressful on the shoulder when your scapula is kind of pinned down. So getting that handoff is going to, again, prevent some wear and tear in the shoulders, allow for a better start position. So again, having a crew to help you is going to be key. Outside of that, again, I think that it's one of those things with equipped benching. Again, I think it's very tempting and easy to kind of take too far. Try to get the tightest bench shirt, try to get the most aggressive amount of plies. And that's where kind of RPS, we do have some rules in place for unlimited, which some people don't agree with, but we'll allow to up to 3 plies for a bench shirt, and it actually needs to be a full shirt. It can't just be like a slingshot or anything like that. Again, take that for what you will. But limiting the amount of plies is going to allow for a little bit more safety. Once you kind of start to get to even 3 plies, the margin for error gets smaller and smaller. The skill component gets higher and higher. And the other thing we won't allow in the RPS is inserts. The inserts can potentially shift around. Some people, I've even had a situation where I've kind of only had 2 plies on one side and 3 plies on another, and that kind of messed me up, and I just couldn't feel it. So those things could happen. So just eliminating it needs to be the shirt needs to be one piece. It can't be multiple pieces. So putting an insert in an existing shirt is not legal in the RPS. You just have to have, you could have multiple shirts that you can kind of change out of. So if you wanted to go from a 1 ply to a 2 ply to a 3 ply, in an RPS division, you would just need to have separate shirts for that. And the shirts need to be, inside the singlet, for RPS, which is kind of a difference between that and IPA. And some federations don't even allow a shirt, like a regular shirt under your bench shirt, just to kind of help with traction and stuff like that, which is kind of annoying. But these are just things you need to kind of understand depending on the federation and depending on the rule book. So in terms of that, I just want to kind of clarify that a lot of the RPS rules are really for safety. It's not to be annoying, because things can get really sketchy really fast if you are using an amount of plies that you are not at a skill level where you could handle. And that's why you see the highest amount of bomb outs, missing all 3 attempts in a powerlifting meet is going to come from the bench press. So I would just say that there's also nothing wrong with opening up with a lower amount of plies. If you want to kind of be more aggressive, if you're in a bench-only meet, sometimes maybe it's just good to kind of get on the board with something that you're more comfortable with, and then you can kind of transition to like a tighter shirt, assuming that you have enough time to do so. So those are different strategies that you can kind of do. But I know, like for me, especially if you're kind of cutting weight, especially if you're dropping a weight class, you have to be more and more careful with your attempt selection with bench press, trying to figure out what's a weight you can actually touch, what's a weight you can also be consistent with. And sometimes if the shirt is too aggressive, the weight that you need to touch is going to be very, very close, if not your max, your limit lift. So it's not really advised to open with a shirt that doesn't have a bigger window of success there. So that's equipped benching in a nutshell. Again, I like to kind of view it. It's you could run a race on foot. You could ride a bicycle. You can get into NASCAR. And, when it comes to unlimited lifting, that is the NASCAR of powerlifting. There's going to be, at the end of the day, the driver is what is going to make success to win the race. It's not the car itself. So that's kind of like how I would view it. It's not like an apples to apples comparison. Equipped lifting and raw lifting are both fruits, but they are different breeds. So think about the, sprinting versus NASCAR analogy. And the less equipment you have, it's more like just a foot race. The more equipment you have, it's more like a NASCAR race where, again, the driver is in control. The driver is going to determine the success or failures of the event. But having, more, ability to produce force and to have that compression at the shoulder joint is going to allow for more overload. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching. If this video podcast helped you, please share it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, stay strong, and then we'll see you soon.